Hi everybody, JJ here at Newegg Studios, and we're getting ready to do an awesome AMD Ryzen build. So today, March 2nd, it's a pretty big eventful day. It's the launch of the X370 chipset formally. It's the launch of the AMD's latest Ryzen series of CPUs, 4 years in the making. And of course, it's the formal availability for our ASUS X370 series of motherboards. So I thought, why not tag team with Newegg and actually throw together an awesome build, actually put it through its paces, actually start it up, maybe do some overclocking, some demonstration of some of the features and functions on our latest generation boards, and just answer your guys' questions about building a PC in general and building an awesome AMD-enabled system for the launch.
Awesome. Well, and I'm Greg. I also work for ASUS, and I'm kind of, hopefully I'm here to be the voice of the audience. I'm not as knowledgeable as JJ about all this stuff, so I'm going to try to ask questions and get some and clarify some things during the build. And we're also joined by Josh behind the camera.
Hey guys, this is Josh from Newegg. So yeah, shoot us your questions both on Facebook and YouTube. We will be taking questions from the audience, so you can actually find out if you have questions for JJ, for Greg, from the guys at ASUS, and also general questions about AMD as well. So what's up with these new 8-core processors, and also what's up with this build. We'll be shooting out some links to really get you guys into the cool gear here. So let's get it started. JJ, what have you got?
So first and foremost, so let's kind of cover the foundation of what we've got here. So I've already got a little bit of the build set up in terms of kind of the look and feel, and of course some of the core components installed, just to be able to save us a little bit of time, but also be able to explain some of the insights on what I've done from a build perspective. So if we outline the key components that we've got, of course, first and foremost, we've got Ryzen, right? So this is AMD's flagship right here. This is the R7 part. This is the 1800X. So this is a beastly CPU.
Yeah, so what's that one rated at? That one's 3.4, 3.5?
3.6 gigahertz in terms of its base clock is what you're packing in here. So this is 8 cores. It features SMT, so that's essentially a hyper-threading technology, so 16 threads. Now what makes the 1800X so special is the X means that it supports a 100 megahertz higher frequency clock under XFR. So XFR is essentially their special single thread real-time auto overclocking that, based on the conditions and the cooling, it helps to extend that further. So if we talk about kind of the base CPU frequencies, we've got 3.6 gigahertz is the guaranteed kind of base clock. You then got a slight increase all-core clock of 3.7. Then there's kind of this additional range that goes up to 4. And then with that XFR goes up to potentially up to 4.1. Right. Now my kind of goal here is I'm hoping to be able to hit a 4 to maybe 4.1 gigahertz across all clocks at any time. Right. Because we're definitely packing in a very capable board with our Prime X370 Pro Series motherboard, and then we definitely got more than enough cooling for this situation. So in terms of the motherboard, like we just talked about, this is a brand new board. It's the ASUS X370 Prime Series board. It's the Pro. Yep. And this is it's not our highest end board, because our highest end board is the Crosshair 6 Hero, but this is really a foundational board to be able to fit for content creators, gamers, general productivity, pretty much anything you want.
Well, it's the X370 chipset, so it's got the same, it's pretty much based on the same platform as the ROG board. So it's a great board all around. And it's, like you said, it's great for a variety of types of systems.
Yeah, so regardless of what you guys want to build for, you're going to have a great experience. So when we talk about the aesthetic, that's really what I wanted to be able to kind of drive through for this type of look and feel for the system. So you can see that I've got white and black in terms of my primary aesthetics, and I'm looking to be able to integrate a third color scheme through the RGB lighting and through some accessories, which is going to be blue. I think this is going to give it some nice kind of cool contrast and feel. So rounding out the kind of components we've got here is that the chassis is Thermaltake's P3. It's their Snow Edition. So this is an open frame chassis. It looks very different than a traditional setup. I don't have the acrylic panel set on there just so you guys don't get any glare, but you can see, of course, it's very different. You could do this actually in 2 different configurations, both vertical and horizontal, entirely up to you.
So you could set it up as like a test bench, right? Yeah,
entirely as a test bench, or if you kind of just wanted to be able to have a flat, kind of low-profile system, it kind of is cool because also the front I/O is all right here in the front, so you could kind of turn that towards you and kind of clearly see your system. Maybe even set something on top. It's an interesting type of setup, and you've got different orientation options here in terms of how this can be configured. You don't have to do what we've done here, which is implement actual vertical design. So if we take, for instance, here we've got our dual card, which is one of the options that we could consider for this build because it's white. It goes really well. You can actually
the motherboard and the case. I mean, it's really cool look.
Yeah, and you can see that one of the differences for this type of setup is that you can actually see the graphics card, right? In normal configuration, if we didn't have this riser cable, which is an option, it's not included by default with the chassis, it would sit in this type of configuration. Now, this isn't bad. I still think it would look pretty cool. You can kind of see you see the white, you see the shroud, you see the heat pipes a little bit. But if you want to pass me the Strix card, I think this is where the Strix actually fits a little bit better, maybe in this type of configuration, because one, it actually has a back plate, and this card also features 3 zones of lighting. So you have the ROG logo here, you've got the Strix logo here, and then you have a little bit underfilled lighting. But even in this configuration, one of the cool things is that the black still complements the design aesthetic that we have, and then the lighting is actually going to be ideally blue, and I think it's actually going to pop.
Facing out. That's
Yeah,
really nice.
it's going to look pretty cool. So I think in either configuration, that's going to look pretty cool. Now, in terms of the cooling solution, we went pretty beefy. This is Thermaltake's Water 3.0, 360 degree in terms of the rad, and it's featuring RGB fans, so of course we could synchronize that with the color scheme that we have for not only the motherboard, but also for the graphics card and even for the keyboard and mice. So this is a pretty beefy cooler. Some of you guys might be wondering. I know you had some questions on this.
Yeah, I mean, like why 360? Is it really going to be that much better than like a 240?
So I would say for most of you guys that are going to be considering overclocking with Ryzen, I've already done some testing, and if you actually go with a high performance, even 120 millimeter closed loop water cooling solution or 240 millimeter, you're going to be able to get a great OC experience. I would say that you'd even be able to get to 4 gigahertz really without any issues, especially when you talk about real world workflows. But for me, I really wanted to try to really maximize the most margin, really have my temperatures be really low, but also I wanted to have the quietest experience possible. When you have a larger radiator and you have more fans, one, I can run these fans at a lower RPM, but I'm also able to displace more heat. By doing that, I can help to keep the system very silent. So take, for instance, when I did overclock the system and my test setup, it was very quiet. So, even under full load, you could almost barely hear the entire system. So I think it works well, but if you guys want to drop down to something more basic, it's entirely doable. You don't have to go.
There's not a lot of cases out there that can fit a 360 millimeter rad. So.
For sure. And also, I think it fills out the look and feel of the system a little bit more. Now, there are some different configuration options. If you went with like a tower heatsink, or if you went with maybe like a 120 or 240, this area back here is actually also where you can mount SSDs. Okay. So you could actually have your hard drives visible. So right now, my configuration, when we flip it around, you'll be able to see that actually I have my 2 crucial MX series SSDs that are my primary drives for storage and for kind of general applications are set up there. But I am actually going to be considering right here an M.2 SSD. So you can see right here, I've got an M.2 PCI Gen 3 NVMe support, so I've got OCZs, RD400, 256 gigabyte drive, so that's a really good kind of foundational baseline.
Yeah, and that's another good reason to mount the GPU away from the motherboard like that.
Exactly.
That, with the M.2 there, it's going to get a lot of heat from that GPU when you're gaming. It'll slow down the performance. I mean,
exactly.
The M.2 will throttle back.
Exactly. So here it gives us a little bit more optimal kind of a scenario in terms of some of those thermal considerations. So from there, the other kind of key component, of course, is the power supply. Power supply is always a critical part for a system build. So here I've got 650 watts. Some people might be wondering,
is that going to be enough?
Is it going to be enough?
Especially if you're going to be overclocking this thing, right?
Yeah, there's always kind of great debate. Do I need 800? Do I need 1,000 watts? And actually, a quality 650 watt is going to be more than enough for even if the GPU and the CPU are heavily overclocked. Especially with Ryzen, one of the most impressive things is for this generation, the actual power draw is significantly reduced from the previous generation. Even when you overclock, it's not a huge amount in terms of the power draw. So especially with a modern and efficient GPU, so take for instance here, we've got the Strix GTX 1070 or 1080, are very power efficient GPUs, or here we've got the RX 480, once again also very power efficient. We're not really talking about a huge amount of power draw, so there's no reason to go crazy on the wattage for the PSU. I'd rather spend the money in making sure that I get one that's high quality, good 80+ rating, good internal topology, modular in terms of the cable design. This one also does have an integrated RGB lighting, so it's actually controllable.
So does that sync up with the Thermaltake system or with the ASUS?
It's actually it's 100% independent, so there's just a little button on the back, so you can shift it into different colors. So we could set it to red, blue, white, whatever really we want in terms of that. That's the same way that this will set up. So in terms of the ASUS Aura Sync, the main items that we're going to be synchronizing is going to be the motherboard lighting, to I think the Strix graphics card. We might toy around and maybe try the RX 480 and see how it looks in there. But I think I want to go with this card, synchronizing it with the board, and then from there, last but not least, we'll throw in some cable mods, wide beam RGB LEDs, and we'll take advantage of the RGB header that's on here.
Right.
And so let me go ahead and now actually just get started in terms of actually getting some of these key things in here.
Let's go for it. I can get this out of your way. This.
Oh yeah, actually.
Well, why don't we show the motherboard we're using? So.
Yeah, well, one of the things I wanted to do is, there's always some kind of primer or foundational questions people are wondering about when they first go about building their system.
Like where to start.
Yeah, so I've already, you can see, got the motherboard mounted, and one of the things that's a little bit different, of course, with AMD is that it doesn't use Intel's design implementation in terms of the way that the CPU socket interface is in. So pretty much what that means is that the pins are on the underside of the CPU, right? As opposed to on Intel, the pins are in the socket, right? Actually, I prefer this type of design. I find it a little bit easier to work with. So you just want to make sure to line that up and get that settled in, and you're pretty much good to go. But you do want to be careful that when you do insert this CPU, that you do want to follow the corresponding notching patterns that are on the CPU and then also on the socket. And you want to be careful that you don't want to bend a pin, right?
Right, definitely.
So that is one tip that's also, I think, that you want to keep in mind. Now, you can see that this one actually already had some pre-applied thermal compound. So some people always wonder, should I need to use kind of like aftermarket thermal compound or anything like that? Actually, for our build, you don't need to worry about it. When you buy something like a closed-loop water cooling radiator, you're good to go. This already actually has thermal compound that's pre-applied. It's been validated and checked by TT to be able to make sure that it reaches the rated specifications of what they're advertising. So you don't need to worry about getting an aftermarket kind of, thermal interface material. Now, if you're super, crazy about wanting to get the absolute best performance, getting a better interface material maybe gets you a couple of C, but it's not a huge deal breaker.
Right. Or if you're testing different solutions, you might want to get some extra thermal paste.
Exactly.
I've run into that before where it's like, you run out and they usually come with it on there, but like every once in a while,
exactly,
you use it more than once.
Or if you want to go through different kind of test fittings or things like that, it'll make more sense in terms of you wanting to do that. Some other key things that you're going to want to have on hand that I'm going to have here for my build, just in case a lot of people always wonder kind of what do I always have when I do my builds. I actually have 3 different screwdrivers in terms of just makes the process easier for me. One you'll see is an extremely long shaft screwdriver. This is really important for some scenarios where, like, if I've got longer threads right here, it makes it easier for me to be able to actually get in. If you use a traditional length screwdriver, a lot of time what you end up doing is that this is going to butt in and you can't really kind of get the torque that you need to, especially if you've got to go vertical instead of a chassis. You don't want a standard length screwdriver. You want a long shank screwdriver. So long shank is going to help there. I sometimes have a medium shank, and that's going to help out for like sometimes the ones that are more externally oriented. And then I've got a micro tip. So this is usually referred to as what's called a PH 060, if you kind of know your screwdriver measurements. And this is really only good for things like M.2 screws and stuff like that.
Yeah, things that don't require as much torque.
Exactly. So those are my 3 there. Another kind of helpful one that I like is this is actually a magnetizer. So it makes it really easy so that if I want to go ahead and be able to make sure that I don't drop screws, I just kind of run this through, and now I have a magnetized tip. And then if I need to demagnetize it, I can just run it back through on the other side, and it's no longer magnetized.
I have never seen one of those before in my life.
Yeah, this is it's really sweet. You can get these; they're pretty cheap. And while I don't have one right here, I also recommend spend a couple of bucks, get yourself a magnetic tray. When you're doing a lot of builds, having a magnetic tray that you can drop your screws into so that they don't go rolling around your table or you don't go losing them is also a huge time saver. So strongly recommend a magnetic tray. These right here are probably my last tip if you are applying your thermal compound. There's always the great debate, how do you apply your thermal compound? I'm going to generally recommend that in most scenarios, what you hear is the general convention of applying something like a somewhat size of a grain of rice or
like 2
a
grains
piece.
of rice or something.
Kind of thing. That's generally accurate. But actually what it really comes down to more so is clear, consistent, fairly thin coverage. How do you do that very easily? Actually use your finger, but you generally don't want to use your finger. So you can actually get something that's been around for a long time in the industry, and it was developed for these type of purposes. It's actually called a finger cod. Finger cod, you put it on your finger, and then from there, I can now go ahead and directly smooth this out exactly the way that I need to, and I can directly and evenly apply my thermal compound without any issues. So you could use, some people in the past refer to, the credit card method and stuff like that. I don't like to use my cards. I don't want to do that.
Then you got to clean the cards.
Exactly. So this I find is an easier option. So these are kind of like my key little items that I would normally recommend in terms of having something. Beyond that, of course, always when you're building, do keep in mind that static electricity is a reality of the world. So if you can, try to ground yourself. You do want to make sure that when you are grounding yourself, you do actually have to have the power cord connected to the power supply because that's actually what's running to your ground. So that helps to actually make sure that you are correctly grounding yourself. Now, if you really want to be cautious, you can get things like, you know, ESD mats and some other things like that.
But bracelet that you clip onto the case.
Exactly.
Chassis.
Yep, you can do a lot of little things like that. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and get started on here. Maybe we'll see if we've got a couple of questions. But I think the first thing that I'm probably going to start with is I've already pulled through a couple of the cables through on this side. So one of the cool accessories we got right here, these are the cables that already come on this build are pretty slick. These are actually fully matte black cables. So I love the way that they look already, but I want to add some color to this build. So I've got TT's premium mod sleeve cables. So these are an alternating red and black. I think they look really nice. But
You mean blue and black?
excuse me, blue and black. You're totally right.
Yeah.
But
And then we got some other ones here
we
too.
got some alternates. Actually, I really like these white and black also. I think they look.
Yeah, that looks really cool with this build, but with the blue, it really stands out.
Yeah, so that's what I kind of want to have a little bit of contrast. So what's your guys' kind of feedback in the community? Do you guys like the white and black more, or do you guys like the blue and black more? Now, the interesting thing is you guys might not really be able to know which one you like more until we finish the build. So I'm going to go ahead and take ownership here, and I'm going to go with blue and black. So let me go ahead and start that process off here, and just get a couple of these connected here. So we're going with the 24 pin first. And then we're going to run that through on that side.
So you start by connecting it to the motherboard first.
Yeah, you know, and actually a lot of time it depends on the chassis, really. You know, depending on how easy it is to work with in certain scenarios. But since here, I can pretty much just run this through to the other side and then just make those connections on the back end because everything is open.
Right.
I don't really have to worry about kind of doing one or the other. And I feel
you
that
don't
it's
have to have super like low profile cable management or anything like that.
exactly. So I feel it's easier for me to just kind of get everything plugged in and then I can just route through as I need to. So we'll get here one in for the CPU.
All right, JJ, we got some comments from Facebook and YouTube.
Okay.
Interestingly, YouTube says almost universally white and black cables.
Okay.
Facebook, though, is blue and black, so I don't know what's up with that.
Interesting.
It
So,
could
Yeah.
have something to do with just Facebook colors, you know.
so we
Yeah,
have,
yeah,
we have
yeah.
some.
The
in-
Facebook interface is all kind of blue anyway.
So what
Yeah.
you know, I'm open to it, guys. Well, let's try it out. Let's see what it looks like with the blue and black. You know, actually, another thing that I really liked about this is, to be honest, I like doing kind of a lot of times where I have a build that has 3 colors, not just 2 colors. So if you notice, my colors here is black, white, and blue. But I had actually even thought about throwing the white with this. So actually even going to a more mix, so I could have maybe like one of these as white and black,
Or maybe
then
the
having
cables,
a blue.
Maybe the PCIe cables.
Exactly. So there's even ways to kind of play around with it. I mean, that's one of the cool things that you have, of course, when you do these type of builds, right? And because these are extensions, the cool part is that, you know, it doesn't really matter what you're dealing with on here. I also really like that these actually come included. A lot of times these aftermarket
combs?
These come with some really nice cable combs already included in the box. So it makes it easier when you start bending these cables that they're going to keep their shape a little bit more nicely.
Yeah, it just makes them look nice and uniform. Like I never really used cable combs until recently, and it makes the build just look so much cleaner. So much nicer.
Yeah, especially if you're going to have like these nice bends or kind of curvature, it helps to make sure that that curvature doesn't kind of protrude outwards and kind of the cables kind of explode out, right? So it just helps to keep a little bit cleaner overall aesthetic, right, for your build.
Sweet. So if you're watching at home, we did a AMD Ryzen build. JJ did it with the NZXT S340 case that was custom painted by Colorware, and it's a crimson paint job. It looks really killer. It's on our Newegg Studios YouTube channel, so go check it out. So that was all red and black, but this one, white and blue.
Yeah, so here we're going entirely opposite. That is a really build I loved, and it featured a beautiful paint job by Colorware. It's in a candy red metallic paint that's got a little bit of flex in it that just, when you look at it in person, it's just a beautiful kind of setup. So yeah, totally, that one was red and black all the way, and this one I went the entire other end of the direction where now we're doing white and black, but I love adding in the blue to just kind of add that other distinction of kind of having a little bit of pop of color. So the next thing I'm going to pull right here is I still have another cable. This is going to be actually for the PCIe power for the graphics card, but I'm not going to connect that one yet. I've actually got the extension cable that comes with our motherboards that have ASUS or a sync. So this is an optimal cable, and the reason why you would want to use this, you don't have to, but if let's say I just took my cable.
Because it's a universal 4-pin connection, right?
Yeah, so if I took my cable mods cable right here and I just plugged it into the motherboard, right, like so, you know, it's not really that great because where am I gonna
Yeah.
kind of
How are you
place the
gonna run it?
cable.
You're gonna have, unless you want LEDs like right on
Yeah,
the
right.
motherboard, right?
Exactly. I'm not that. I like lighting, but I don't like lighting that much.
Yeah.
Right. So the benefit of having this extension cable is we give you a really nice length cable that you can pretty much route this wherever you end up wanting to go.
Right. So either around the bottom or around the top.
Exactly. And so my thought process here is some people might be wondering, well, where are you going to put the strip? Now, this is magnetic. You could totally do something like this, right? But to me, that's way too bright.
It'd be shining right.
Yeah,
at
it's
you
just
when
going
you
to
look at the system.
exactly. So I'm not the hugest fan of going that route in terms of the placement for those RGB LED strips. So my thought process here that I wanted to have is I want to use this more as accent or underfill lighting. So I'm going to run this cable through the top here. I'm going to actually use the fact that this is all, of course, steel, and I'm going to magnetize it to this to the inner frame to give me a little bit kind of like a backsplash of blue that you kind of see a little bit through the
So
back.
you can see through all the holes in the
Yeah, and you just get a
case.
sense that kind of like there's this glowing blue, which I think is kind of cool. And then I'm going to run this one underneath this section because you see there's a little bit of spacing here, right?
Right.
So this fan, when this comes on, will give you some nice blue diffusion, but then I want to create another little bit of underfill blue right underneath
Just to
here.
add a little more to it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So that's kind of my thought process where I'm going to set up those two cables. So once again, it kind of fits in that scheme of the way that we do it on a lot of our motherboards where I don't really want to see the lighting right off the bat, but I want to get a
You don't
sense
want to
of
see
like.
the actual LEDs, but you want to see what the light from the LEDs hits, right?
Exactly, exactly. So let me go ahead and connect this cable. Now, for you guys that have never connected this before, you do need to keep in mind that there is some polarity considerations. So you do want to align the 12 volt with it with the correct markings on the header. So this little actually cable that we include says RGB, and then it has a little arrow, and the arrow is the designator for the 12 volt.
Right.
So that's where I just need to make sure that that one lines up first. And I'm going to run that in there. So now I've got a couple of different ways that I could play around with some of the cable routing. I'm actually going to use my heatsink.
Right. Yeah.
So I'm going to feed this literally into the middle of my heatsink here like this, and I think that's going to look kind of cool
Yeah,
because
that'll hide it really well.
you won't see it. So I'm going to feed it in through there and then kind of loop it there at the top and then feed this whole thing out. So we'll pull it through here.
Now, what kind of RGB LED strips are you using?
So these are cable mods. They're wide beam RGB LED, and these one I really like them because they're the quality. They have a really nice optimized kind of field of view where they've optimized the LED. They're bright, they're magnetic, you know,
Right.
and they're ORSync certified. So we know that they're going to work with our board. So
Nice.
that's great. So the next part
We have
here
a
is
copy right here.
next part right
Cable mod.
here is an interesting piece, which is the cable for our pump. We already connected it, but for you guys wondering, we do have a dedicated header on here. So this is an AIO pump header. So you can see right here. Ideally, what I might use is a little bit of like two-sided glue tape to kind of wrap this around and kind of hold it right there and then plug it in so then you pretty much won't see it too much there. That's kind of my thought process, is something like that. Or if you guys have ever found it, you can use gaff tape. Gaff tape is really soft and it's kind of a matte.
Like a fabric tape.
Yeah, it's a fabric tape, and the great thing is that it's really easy to remove, and when you hide it in there, you won't see it because unlike something like duct tape or electrical tape, it tends to be glossy, right?
Right.
So I can show you guys a little bit of it. So this is actually a little bit of gaff tape that we've got here from our studio. So you can see it's got this really kind of soft look to it. Oh yeah. Actually, we got an entire roll right here, guys. So see right here. And the really cool thing too about this is that it's really easy to tear. So you can tear this like in really thin little strips to be able to put this. So you can get it. It's pretty inexpensive, and it's actually got a lot of usefulness to it. So I'm a big fan of it. So
Hey JJ, I got a question about the pump.
Yeah.
So you're plugging it into a pump header on the motherboard. Is that going to regulate it like a fan? Is it going to ramp up and down the pump speed depending on the thermal needs?
So that's a great question. So in most situations, most all-in-one pumps are usually DC powered, which means they're a fixed actually operating standard. So they're by default usually just need a full output voltage, and they're not going to vary. There are newer pumps that have now come on the market. There are newer pumps that are now PWM based, and they vary. In that situation, depending on that pump design, because we do have PWM support, we could optimally support that. So in either scenario, you would still want to use the pump header. It's just really up to the type of solution that you have. Some pumps, because there aren't motherboards that always feature this type of design like ours
Yeah.
don't even use this type of connector, and sadly they use something like a SATA connector or like a Molex to power the pump.
Right.
But then the disadvantage of that is you kind of
You have to have an extra cable coming out of your power supply.
Exactly.
And another cable to hide back behind.
and it's kind of a bummer
the
because
chassis.
those cables usually you don't have a singular lead, right? So you've got
Yeah.
like 3 SATA connectors,
not using.
and it's like, where are you going to run that, you know,
Yeah.
to try to kind of manage it? So it can be a little bit more of a pain to use that type of setup. So I might do that. Another kind of quick tip, I still think I'm going to use my gaffing tape, but if I use my screwdriver, some of you guys might have seen this before, but if you like curling, not everybody likes the way it looks, you can actually do a curling technique here. So you just wrap this around like this. So if we get it pretty tight and you keep doing it, what it's going to do is the actual cable is going to keep this shape. And so this is a nice option sometimes when you got really like tight little leads. If you want to, you can use something like this. So I'm going to keep doing it. This also is why I like having a longer shaft screwdriver, because you can do this. So I'm going to get in really tight
That definitely makes it easier.
and get a little bit more, and then I'm just going to pull out. And now you can see that I could do like that.
Sounds like an old school telephone cable, right?
Yeah,
So
you know,
that
and,
looks nice and clean.
and it looks, at least it has like a clean structured
Yeah,
order to
it's
it.
not just a crazy wire.
Hey,
in
it's
there.
just
it's like
a-
with purpose, right?
Exactly. That's the thing. That's a perfect way to look at it. It's
Yeah.
with purpose. So it looks like it makes sense. So I've got those 2 leads. I've got my ASUS Aura Sync cable. Maybe I'm going to go ahead and drop in my DIMMs now. So,
All right. So we've got a few selections over here. What do you think you're going to use?
so let's actually just show people a little bit of the different choices that we've got
Okay.
here. So, you know, going with our white motif here, we had some Crucial Ballistic Sports. So these, I think would look really cool. Let's maybe give me like 2 of them so we can just see here. We can get the vote of the viewership here. See what they overall kind of feel. So now with our design, of course, we've got a single-sided latch design, which makes it really simple in terms of putting in your memory. So you don't have to worry about kind of clicking in that other DIMM, right?
Right.
You just have to have more of a centered force when you end up installing the DIMM. So push that in there again. So I don't think that looks bad. I think it's kind of cool. It's got the white vibe to it. You know, you could put in the white card. Okay, I could see that working. You still got the blue, but it might work better with the blue and black cables maybe. I don't know. What are you guys thinking so far?
We got a comment on YouTube. Derek is asking, where is the blue RAM? All in caps, very passionate.
Where's
about
the
it.
blue RAM? I would agree. You know, actually, in preparation for this, we actually had some awesome Avexor Core series Blitz memory that was black with blue tipped LEDs
Yeah.
that I thought would have looked perfect with this. Or Avexor also makes a Tesla series with the plasma tubes in there
Oh, okay, those
that are white and blue. And those, I think, would have also looked beautifully in this build. Sadly, because of the way shipment and timing worked
But
out, we wouldn't do that.
These could be blue.
Yes, but this is actually another really cool option. So these are G.Skill's latest Trident Z RGB series DIMMs. And right off the bat, their general color aesthetic already works because they're gray and then they've got black. So that already fits. But the cool thing is that they've got multi-RGB points inside here that can be controlled by the motherboard. Now, right now, we don't have the update release that's final. But in a little bit upcoming time, we'll release an update that will allow you to have this synchronized lighting even with the board. So you could have this blue.
I think it might be out now.
So this actually might be a pretty cool option in terms of looking. So, but you guys can see what it would look like here. So let me just pop one of these in here.
Yeah, I think that update is out and available.
On our Ultimate Series boards it is, but not yet on the
Oh,
AMD Series
okay.
boards.
JJ, got another question for you.
Yep.
Someone's very passionate about asking, how does the X86 architecture access more than 4 gigabytes worth of memory?
Well, so that's all based on actually their 64-bit instruction set is already present in x86. So this has been around for a long time. And of course, all the operating systems are also 64-bit capable. So this actually is what allows us to address higher memory. In previous generations, so before, like with Windows XP, there was still a 32-bit operating system. And this was where there was more of a transitional era where you could actually have higher density memory configurations, but you wouldn't actually be able to address all that memory. But now under current generations, if you're running a modern operating system, modern hardware and everything like that, you can have full support for that.
All right,
So
got another actual question about this. It's, I think there's some confusion because people are new to AMD, don't know quite what they're looking at. This is DDR4 memory in here. What are the speeds that we're hitting? Or what do you support?
So that's actually a great question. So right here, one of the last DIMMs that I got here, this is a Corsair all black DIMM that we could pop into this system. And this one is actually a 3000 megahertz module. So with this board actually, and with Ryzen in general, you can actually hit some pretty nice speeds. So with doing a 2-DIMM configuration like this, which offers either 8 or 16 gigabytes, so that's a pretty nice amount of memory for most enthusiasts.
You can go up to 32.
Yes,
with DDR4, right?
yes, with 16 gig DIMMs,
yeah.
exactly. In those configurations, the board can support up to 3200 megahertz. So I think for the vast majority of
pretty fast.
users, you don't really need to worry about that. Now, if you want to go in full 4-DIMM population on DDR4, as of right now, we're still fine-tuning this performance metric, but you would be looking at about 2400 in terms of the maximum frequency with 4-DIMM population. But if you're looking for a 2-DIMM population, like I said, either 4 gig, 8 gig, or 16 gig DIMMs, then you can get to much higher frequencies.
Right.
But keep in mind, this is going to continue to evolve and be improved upon. And even right now out of the box, we have some very good performance experience. And if you really want even faster memory performance than 3200, you could take a look at a board like our Crosshair boards, where we offer some higher frequency validation support. There is also something that we'll show once we get it actually tested up and running, is how you can actually enable leveraging Intel memory kits, which most of the kits right now on the market are actually what are called XMP kits. So they're designed and validated for Intel platforms. But we have a feature on our boards that's called DOCP profiling. So this actually will allow you to read the timings and the frequencies for these and actually have them understood by the board, so that even though if you don't understand about how to perform and how to optimize these, you can just select a button and it'll automatically set the values for you, so you can actually leverage your memory. So I think I'm going to go with the G-Skill.
Okay.
So let's pop these in. Let's go with that. And we're going to
Just
just,
look the most aggressive.
yeah, I think,
Even with the LEDs off, it matches with the white and the
yeah,
the gray
and
black.
you know, I think it might be kind of interesting because these have a really kind of nice soft diffusion to them. So I think, you know, even if everything else is blue, we'll see how it looks. You know, we can always change that. That's the benefit of RAM, right?
Are you going to do all 4?
Yeah, I'm just going to do all
Might as
4
well.
for right now. You know,
We've
just
got it.
so
Might
we
as well,
get,
might as well fill each
yeah,
sim, right?
yeah. Hey, you know, let's live a little while right now.
Yeah.
So we'll go with all 4 of them right here.
We're at Newegg headquarters. We got all the RAM we could possibly ever need.
All right, so we got all of our DIMMs inside there. And now next, let me go ahead and get my GPU in here.
Alrighty.
So
So you're going with the Strix?
yeah, I'm going to go with the Strix. I'm going to go with the, I think, you know, with this type of system, especially, you know, with an 1800X, you know, legitimately, I think you're going to be targeting, you know, 2560. I mean, we've got, you know, an RG Swift monitor. This is 2560. So I think we want to be able to target, you know, a high frame rate gaming experience. So RX 480 is a fantastic part, and you could totally run Crossfire on here, right? But for me, I want to go with a single GPU configuration. So I think, you know, the 1070 or the 1080 would be a great part to pair with this new Ryzen, especially because Ryzen also now has got more than enough performance to not limit that GPU, and we've got PCI Gen 3, so we can fully maximize it. So I've got my Ryzen card already installed here, so that goes to my primary by 16 slot.
Now, one of the questions I had about that Ryzen card, I mean, is that going to affect the performance at all?
That's actually a really good question. So as long as you have a high quality Ryzen card solution that's been validated and they're using good material design, then this will essentially not affect the overall performance of the graphics card. But this is where you do want to be cautious. Some people sometimes try to save some money, and there's like different ones that are available from, you know, kind of like, you know, different online retailers where sometimes you're getting a much lower price but not necessarily the same quality. And actually you can have things that even go as bad as like browning or like other issues. So it's definitely, if you want to use this, I would go with the validated.
Go with a high-end one.
Yeah, with the validated recommended
That's
solutions.
a Thermaltake branded one, so that must have come with the case or with that PCIe extension.
It didn't come with it. It's an optional accessory that you can purchase, but it is been validated for it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so let me line up the parts right here. I need to get this seated in here. Give me 1 second here.
All right, while JJ is doing that, one of the nice things about the new AMD boards and just the AMD platform in general is it's not, say, the lesser offerings of, you know, last time around. Compared to the Intel boards, there's a lot of the great features that are found on the new ASUS boards for the AMD AM4 chipset. So one of the questions that we have, JJ, is about overclocking. We're going to get to that, but you know, the AI suite, ASUS AI suite, the rest of it, it's you know, these boards are supporting it, and
yeah,
can do
for
some
sure.
pretty impressive things.
I've already got a test OS installation on here, guys. So once I post this, I'll be able to jump in the UEFI and show you guys what a little bit of the overclocking experience will look like, both from a manual perspective, but then also even if we do it from an automatic perspective. So now again, here you can see, this screwdriver, I could totally do this, but this is also, again, we're having.
See, it might be nice to have one of the Or even shorter. Okay.
So a long shank again allows me to not have that interference option. So you could go with what's called a stubby.
Yeah, you need one of those little stubby ones.
Yeah, the stubby ones, the always problem I find sometimes with the stubby is because you're using, you have actually less range of motion. It reduces your torque. So you put a little bit more stress on your hand, but that works in some good. So I do have even a stubby version for that.
Right.
It's like this big. So, you know, it's all part of your kind of toolkit.
Yeah.
So you can see here, I think that's looking pretty slick.
Yeah, I like that.
And next we're gonna go ahead and now get my PCIe power in there. We're gonna route this guy.
And that kind of changes the whole aesthetic of the build. Now it's more of like a black gray or dark gray build with white highlights, right?
Well, this is actually actually a little bit of the lighting, right? But it is black, but you get a little bit of kind of this
Oh yeah,
light.
we've got some pretty bright lights.
Yeah,
It's
you
reflective.
get a little bit of this like, kind of light absorption into the material that gives it a little bit of that, but it still all fits, right? It's still all kind of these monochromatic color tones, right? And then we've got these nice pops of course, this really bright blue. And so I think that when the LEDs come on, we're good to go there. So let's do a quick sanity check, make sure we're looking good. So I've already got my PWM fan splitter cable. So right now, that's the cool thing is this fan splitter is running all 3 fans from just the CPU fan header.
Right.
So I've got 3 fans coming
So now
to here.
when you go into the UEFI, CPU fan, that's all of them.
Correct. That's all 3 of them are going to be handled through there. I've got the pump connected to make sure that the pump is working. Got my DIMMs installed, CPU power, 24-pin power, PCI Express power. Got the screws mounted in here. Got the riser. And then I've got all my leads. I've also got my SSDs in here. So let me give you guys a quick just little showcase of the back for perspective. So show you guys what I'm working with here before I start making some of these connections. And it's nice because it's just all this open space and it's really easy afterwards. I'm not going to really worry about cable managing this too much right now because I want to be able to show you guys some demos, but I want to show you kind of how it works out here. So you can see right here, I've got my 2 MX series drives. I maintained the look and feel as well. These are great bang for the buck drives as well though, the MX 300 series. So nice high capacity to price point.
You can put those on RAID 0 and still get over a gigabit per second.
Oh, totally, totally. But you know, we've got our Rockin' M.2 SSD there. But you can see these 2 are mounted right here. But you could also mount them here actually if you wanted to. So you got a couple of different ways you could play around with it. Now a quick tip for you guys. I wanted this to be visible. So normally these actually mounting points, you would actually have to flip the drive backwards. So I used actually what are called glue dots. These are actually removable adhesive glue that I actually put right here on the inner frame. And so they're just
glued in.
They're just glued in, but it's not like a permanent glue, but it has a very long lifespan. So they're just there, but if I really wanted to kind of pull out, I could pull them out if I wanted to kind of change them out. So you can see right here, we've got kind of our key cables, and we've got a couple of other little I/O cables that I'll run through right now. So I think the main one is we've got front USB 3, and we've got HD audio. I'm going to go ahead and probably jump. I won't worry about right now connecting my front leads. So I'll just jump them with my screwdriver. So you guys might be interested to see how that kind of turns out if you've never jumped a board with a screwdriver, but that's what I'm going to do. So I got these 2, but let me go ahead and connect these leads really quickly. So I've got my 24-pin power here. Let me get this one and just line up the notches here. Get one plugged in. Okay, we're good to go there. Got CPU power. And good to go there. We've got PCI Express power. Now this one has 2 leads on there because of course, you know, if you had a higher end graphics card, sometimes you need, you know, a 6-pin and an 8-pin. But here,
although what's interesting is even like the 1080, it only has 8 pins.
Yeah, it depends on some of the cards. Some of the cards have higher end power configurations for, you know, more
for overclocking,
for more power delivery. Yeah, but even for this one, the way that we've designed it, great, very still power efficient, only a single power cable. So that's really nice. So it just minimizes that. I already ran the SATA power connections for my SSD, so I don't need to worry about that. And for M.2, we don't have to run any power because that's provided directly by the slot. So pretty much good there. Now this one, I'm going to run the underside here.
And that's the USB 3.0 header, right?
Yep, you got it. Yeah, so that we can have some high-speed I/O. Now the Prime, it has a front USB 3.1 port on it, but that is not yet on chassis.
Yeah, that's still kind of a new feature, the USB 3.1 the front panel USB 3.1 header.
Correct, yes. But we are talking to partners, even including Thermaltake, to be able to incorporate that specification. So hopefully in the not too distant
Yeah,
future,
so you
you'll
get that
start.
super high speed USB right up front. Realistically, where you need it, if you're going to use one of those latest generation flash drives.
Yeah, external SSDs, whatever
Right.
it might be. You know, I mean, you want that speed conveniently placed, right? You don't want to have to necessarily be.
Yeah, you don't have to reach around the back of the system all the time.
Exactly.
Although with this case, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah, it's a
You know,
bit.
This case is pretty open. You wouldn't have any trouble reaching that.
So here I'm just running my HD audio, and so that's going to be for the front audio lead.
Headphones,
Yep.
headphone microphone jack on the front.
So I'll
Oh,
probably
don't forget the LED cable
for
for the
the.
LED strip.
I think I've already got that one connected.
Oh, okay.
Yep. So I've already got the LED connected there, but I'll wait a little bit to place that. So
Yeah.
we'll probably come back to that a little bit later. Right now I'm just going to finish connecting my core leads and get those in. And we've got a USB 2 header. Just, doesn't hurt to have more USB, right?
Yeah, you could plug something into that like it doesn't require a super high transfer speed.
Yeah,
I feel like if you have USB headphones or something,
Yeah.
you don't need USB 3.0 for USB powered headphones, like wireless headphones, things like that.
Or, I'm sure all of us have a whole bunch of old USB 2 flash drives,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
You're still rocking them. It's like, hey, I got this a while ago. I don't want to
Yeah.
get rid of it, right?
It's like, hey, let me put this video on here, watch on the TV or something like that, or
All
search
right.
for something small.
So we can see here, we've got the overall look. We'll come back to actually wrangling up our LED in a little bit.
So I don't know if you guys at home noticed, but the front looks a lot better than the back.
Yeah, yes. So we are going to go with that. Now let me plug in my power cable.
But I mean, I have faith that JJ could do some impressive cable management on the back here. But in the interest of time, I want to get this thing put together and show you how to start overclocking and really getting this thing configured.
Yeah. So you guys can see right here, we've got the light now to the actual
Right.
motherboard. So that's letting us know that we're actually successfully receiving power. So at this,
Now, one thing that I've seen people ask before is that it's just plugged in now,
Mhm.
right? And the lights are going.
Yep.
Is there a way to disable that feature? To
Yeah.
where when the system's off, you don't get any LED lights.
Yep, you can go into the UEFI, and there's an option that just disables onboard motherboard lighting.
Okay.
So if you don't want that, you don't have to worry about it.
Okay.
So right now we also do have here we actually have our M.2. So I'm going to just put my standoff in. I might come back to that a little bit later because I actually have my test OS on a different drive. But what you
Okay.
can always do is you can kind of verify, okay, there's the length. It's 2280. So we can see if I can get that in there. It's a little bit of a tight fit.
Yeah, that's tough, especially with the board vertical like that. I mean, don't know if you guys can see this at home, but he's putting in a little standoff for the M.2, which is about that big.
Yep. Thankfully,
very
I've got veteran hands.
Yeah.
So I'm able to get that placed in there.
And now this is where that thin screwdriver comes in.
Exactly. And then also, for anybody that's ever installed this, once again, this is where the magnetized tip is hugely advantageous because
Yeah.
if anybody's ever dropped an M.2 screw or a small
Yeah.
threaded screw, it is
the
your
M.2 screw if you guys are curious.
it is your pain. It looks like a little speck of dust in Greg's hands right there.
So yeah, so you definitely want to use a magnetic screwdriver with this one because it's a pain to hold it on there.
Yep. So we're gonna get it there, and while I picked this drive for its price to performance and the fact that it's an NVMe PCIe Gen 3 x 4 SSD, so it's a great drive. I also doesn't hurt that that little
It's cool.
color scheme, and
Yeah.
it's hitting us with a nice little.
So I think our audience is finding out that JJ wanted blue from the beginning.
It's the truth.
All right, so let me go ahead and jump our lead here, guys. So give me one moment. Okay, and I can get this.
Graphics card like that, it's a little tougher to jump it. So basically what he's doing is there are pins that you connect the power switch to. And if you connect those two pins with a screwdriver, it connects the circuit, so it turns on.
Yep.
And it worked. I
So
wouldn't suggest trying that at home unless you're like a pro, because you could probably cause some damage.
Yeah,
Did you cause damage doing that?
No, not
Okay.
not really. I mean, I will say there is the potential that if you're not looking carefully, you don't want to nick the board.
Yeah.
So you could you
Or you
could
could
scrape.
bend the pins.
Yes, and you could bend the pins, and that would be so. Yes, I would agree that be cautionary. It's
Yeah.
not really the ideal solution. I'm somebody that I've done this for a very long
Yeah.
period of time, so I'm very comfortable doing it.
Yeah.
But yes, ideally use the little Q connector that we give you,
Yeah.
connect your leads, and just do it the normal
Yeah.
way. Yeah.
But also some of the ROG boards that we have a little start button and reset button built in, so you don't.
Yeah, you don't even have to do that.
Does
So
the
you can
crossfire or the crosshair have that?
Yes,
built
the
in?
crosshair has that. Yep, and you're good to go. So you can see right here, we're already getting some lighting going on. We've got the blue right here. If I wanted to toggle through, just so you guys could see how I could go, there's white, so I could have an alternate
Nice.
color. You can go to the red or you could go to the RGB. So I'm going to keep it on that blue. We've got this one set to the blue. This one is not yet synchronized yet also with our motherboard, but once we get into the desktop interface, we'll be able to set these two guys to blue so you guys can get a look for it. But I think already right off the bat, I'm liking that blue and the blue kind of pairing up with these, and then the black, I think
Yeah,
it's
it
looking
looks
pretty
pretty
cool. So let's get our monitor connected here. And we're also going to be in a little bit getting you guys into the desktop so you guys can see some of the OC experience here. We'll get a secondary output set up for you guys, so give me 1 second here. So there we go. Oh,
Hey,
it's already
It
booted.
works.
It's in the desktop. We have success, people. So let me just pull this back out here a little bit. You can see we've got our operating system up and running there. So need to get our HDMI cable.
You got it? You need it?
Yep, no, I got it. We're
Okay.
good. We're good.
Got that gigantic HDMI cable to
Yep. So we're
give you
gonna.
guys a
Oh, there we go.
full screen view of the UEFI.
So we got here our Claymore keyboard and mouse. So one of the reasons why I also love this is these are black.
Yeah,
Now
well,
they're-
this was the ROG Gladius 2.
Yep.
Yeah.
And one of the cool things that I really like about this is that these are also the only peripherals on the market that are full RGB certified for ASUS Aura Sync. And so what that means too is I can now have that kind of continuity and consistency of having anything that I stream in terms of the color from the board and
Right.
from the graphics card will also be synchronized here on my peripherals.
Right.
So let me go ahead and kind of now do a couple of these quickly here.
Yeah.
So if we want to go ahead and maybe move that graphics card
Get some,
aside.
make some room for you.
And we're going to do maybe a little bit of fan tuning in a moment. Greg, if you want to help me to get these
Yeah.
fans
I'll
out
go
here,
ahead and unbox these for you.
we can do that for you guys. Let's move this over a little bit.
Now, JJ, some people online are commenting that it's amazing that the new boards have Windows 10 installed already on them.
Oh yeah, I know. Isn't that's we're working on that.
Maybe
No,
that's the next step. Right?
this is my test installation out here, so that I was running. So that's the reason why it is already set up. We don't want to make you guys. Although to be honest, if you did a straight Windows install from a flash drive, USB 3, it literally takes about 5 to 6 minutes. So even if we would have had to do it in real time, it's a quick process. So let me extend the display here. So you guys hopefully should be able to see my display here in a moment.
All right, so I've got two additional, what these look like 140 millimeter fans.
Okay, so we're duplicating our display. And yep, there you guys
There we
can
go.
see our this interface. So we're here on our Windows desktop, and you can see we're in our ASUS Aura software. So I'm going to go ahead and just default everything quickly. And I will go ahead and just reboot the board. I'm going to go into the UEFI and set defaults. Now you guys are going to drop out here just because we can't output to the UEFI at the same time. But I'm just going to essentially set the board to defaults. And then from there, we'll go into the software interface so you can see how we're going to do some of the synchronization, and we'll then start to show you guys some of the overclocking aspects, and then also some of the cool, I think, fan tuning configuration options that we can set up for this system, or even in general, if you guys are building a system, some of the cool options that we have available. If you want to go ahead and take
Yeah.
off those cable ties for me, that'd be great.
Let me do everything.
I'm sorry. All right.
Just-
So we're pretty much good to go here. All right.
All right, so what are you doing now?
So-
Can everyone at home see the BIOS? Probably not.
So I don't think you guys can see. Let me see if I can pull this out a little bit. I don't know. Maybe we'll be able to.
A little bit of glare. Maybe tilt
Yeah.
the monitor down a little bit.
There
Oh,
Uh,
that's pretty good.
we
There
go.
you go.
There we go.
So now you guys can see the UEFI a little bit.
So there's actually an option right here so that if I head over to DOCP, this little DOCP option, you can see that actually it allows us to read the memory profile. So even though these kits we have are at a higher rated frequency, it actually automatically sets and knows that, hey, the current limit is 3200 megahertz. So if you wanted to go ahead and have different profile configurations, this is how you can easily take advantage of Intel XMP memory kits. So maybe a little bit later, if you guys want to see, I can actually show you guys with like the Corsair DIMMs.
Memory,
Yeah, and I could actually show you how the Corsair profiles actually work and how that kind of setup works. But right now, I'm just going to load everything from a baseline default so that we can run the kind of the auto overclocking, and you guys can see what the system's capable of from a standard configuration. So now that we've done that, we're just going to go ahead and enter back into the operating system. So let me shift this back a little bit here.
So with these fans, you just want to hook these up to additional fan headers on the motherboard.
Yep.
And then set them to adjust automatically to like the temperature of the graphics card.
Correct, yeah. So, right now we have an open testbed configuration, so we don't have a lot of the normal, I guess, airflow considerations you would have in a normal setup.
Right.
But if we kind of envisioned a more traditional chassis, right, this would maybe be potentially either mounted on the top or the front. So you might have front intake fans, then maybe you would have like a rear exhaust fan, you might have a side fan, you might have a bottom mounted fan. So what I'm going to end up doing is I'll connect these two to two different chassis fan headers, and what I want to be able to show you guys is that one of the really cool things we can do is we can run a fan calibration profiling process where we can actually check what the operating metrics are for the fan from the minimum level all the way to their maximum level. And it's pretty cool when you get to see how it works in real time. So you guys should hopefully be able to see our Windows desktop here in a moment. So let me just open up our software again. Okay, there we go, great. And so you can see right here at the top, I've got my motherboard, my graphics card, my keyboard, and my mouse. So I'm gonna set my keyboard and my mouse to both be items that I wanna now have synchronized. So it's going to take a moment there. And now we've got a couple of quick color profiles, and of course you could just select your own, but I'm going to go with the blue, and I'm going to set that to be for all my items. And now I'm going to apply that. And you can see right here, now I've got blue here. We've got blue for the graphics card.
Oh yeah, hold up the keyboard and mouse too.
So
everything's all synced.
So you can see right here now that we've got everything synchronized. So I think I've got now this pretty cool looking, yeah, it's pretty slick right there. So it's a pretty cool looking setup. Now, camera's showing this guy a little bit, kind of like I think like a pinkish kind of purple.
Kind of purple with the camera.
But I can definitely tell you guys it's
blue.
It's very much
Confirmed, it's blue in real life.
It's very much blue in real life here, guys.
Come back to the wide shot.
Yeah.
Blue.
Yeah, it's blue. That's interesting. Yeah. So hey,
That's weird. So just a little some sort of strange setting with the camera makes that one specifically look a little purple.
Now we got some questions online. One of the questions is, do we need the triple fan radiator for this? And I think it's an overall question about, how much does a consumer actually need? Do they have to buy all the top end components?
For sure, no. And like we talked about a little bit earlier, the main reason why I picked it is because I absolutely wanted to make sure that thermals weren't going to be an issue if I wanted to aggressively overclock this as much as possible. Two, because it's a larger type of heat sink, right? I can displace more heat. I can keep those fans running at a lower RPM to keep it very quiet. Because right now, I think, Greg, you're right here next to me. You can't almost even hear the system, right? Yeah. It's extremely quiet in that regard. You can see we've also got the 0 dB operating mode working for our graphics card. So it's a very, very, very quiet system. So I wanted acoustics. I wanted a lot of thermal headroom. Yeah. But like we talked about, you could totally get a 240 millimeter, or you could go with a more traditional, just high quality tower heatsink, even with one fan, and you could still have a very good overclocking experience.
Or like a 120 millimeter radiator. If you're not going to be overclocking, that's more than enough.
Yeah, no, and even if you're overclocking, the difference is really just going to be how much thermal headroom do you want to be comfortable with, right? Some people kind of like, I don't even want to be at 80 degrees. I want to always be like at 70 degrees, right? So this comes into
max speed.
Exactly. So this just gets into a relative kind of what's your comfort zone. The last point that I would make to that too is keep in mind that there's a difference between temperatures under stress tests and what you do in the real world. When you're gaming, when you're web browsing, when you're listening to music, your CPU is never pegged at 100%, so the temperatures are going to actually be quite low.
Yeah.
It's also worth mentioning that all the Ryzen CPUs are overclockable. They're all unlocked, which is slightly different than the Intel K-series CPUs. So the classic thing is if you're buying a CPU that can be overclocked, you should be overclocking. There's no reason to do it, especially with how easy it is these days. A lot of people that haven't built a PC in a few years are pretty shocked about how easy it is to overclock, and JJ's going to show that in a second. Now, one thing, I actually priced out this whole system with all the components here, and it's about $2,000.
Okay.
Right.
The CPU itself is the $499 version, and that's the Strix 1080 overclocked version, right?
This one's actually the 1070, but yeah, 1080 is of course a great option as well. But legitimately, I think that's one of the great things. I think if you wanted to go for the little bit more bang for the buck kind of build, you'd go for the 240 millimeter rad. Go for the 1700 series processor, which could equally be overclocked, and you don't drop anything. You still get 20 megs of cache, right? So it's pretty much the same. It's still 8 core, 16 thread. So I would go with that 1700. I'd get the 240 version of this, and then go with like a 1070. You save yourself a nice little price point, but you still could almost get exactly the same performance.
That would probably knock it down to like $1,500–1,600.
Exactly.
Which is for a that's a high-end system.
That's a very high-end system, yeah, especially with that number of threads, and once we overclock it, it's pretty crazy.
Definitely. So, I mean, I remember my first system that I ever built was about $1,700. It was actually AMD.
Yeah.
It was an AMD Athlon XP 2100 CPU.
Okay.
2.1 gigahertz, 1 core.
Oh, there you go.
But I overclocked it to 2.3.
There you go. See,
that was my first overclocking experience with an air cooler. So a little bit of history. That was in, I'm not going to date myself. Won't say how long ago it is. If you really want to look it up, you can see when that CPU came out.
So we're going to jump here into the desktop, start giving you guys a little bit of perspective in terms of what the overclocking experience is like. So this is the AI Suite overall software interface. So this is how we can do everything on the board. We can monitor temperatures, we can overclock the system, we can do fan calibration. So one of the things that's really cool about this build, and when you just build with ASUS components in general, is that it allows you to easily maximize the investment in this hardware, right? If you're kind of a first-time builder, haven't built in a few years, but you bought all this nice hardware, it's kind of nice that you can just jump into something to be able to essentially fully realize the investment that you made into it, right?
And you can test different things out. Like that's kind of like with me with my first build. Like I wasn't a huge overclocker, but I'm like, hey, I could try. It's an overclocked CPU or a unlocked CPU.
So why not try it out?
Why not try it out? Because nowadays there's so many, like you'd have to really do something wrong to like mess up some hardware. There's
Correct.
so many safety features on these, and as long as you're using this interface, it's really kind of foolproof.
Yeah, no, it is. We do a lot of safeguards, and even in a worst case scenario, if you had to just reset the board back to defaults, that's pretty much what you generally have to do.
Yeah.
If something were to go wrong, quote unquote, you just pretty much need to do that aspect. So right now we're in the actual AI Suite interface, so let's go ahead and show that to you guys here. And we're going to go through a couple of different options. So you can see right at the top, we've got fast tuning and extreme tuning. So if you just wanted to do something really basic, you could pick the fast tuning, either TPU 1 or TPU stage 2. So these are preset profiles that we'll have that will just set the frequency for you, reboot, and that's it, you're done, right? But where presets are we really don't have a high level of flexibility is in the fact that every CPU is different. You have the silicon lottery, right? And so when you have the silicon lottery, you want something that's going to tune per each CPU. So that we're going to keep it to the extreme tuning option. Now the next option that we have down here is going to be stress test duration, distribution. So this allows you to kind of allocate between the CPU and the DRAM. So this is actually a pretty good thing, because if you have a lot of memory or you have overclocked memory, you want to be able to distribute accordingly to make sure that you're testing both CPU and the memory at the same time.
Right, so that will overclock the memory if you
actually,
turn it up a little bit.
For our utility, it actually won't. What that is mainly doing is just making sure that making sure to test the memory. Right. So the next item is going to be stress test duration. By default, we pick 15 seconds because that allows for very quick OC experience. Right. And what we found in about 85% of cases, that will give you full stability. But if you're somebody that's really, really critical, then you can totally extend this up to 1 hour between each increment, right? Right.
So that'll give the system plenty of time to like get to its thermal threshold.
Exactly.
And really kind of test out the reliability of each setting.
Exactly, each setting. But we're going to keep it at 15 seconds just for the purposes of this demonstration here for you guys.
You don't want people to watch this thermal temp, like have the temperature, an hour-long test. That's ridiculous.
So we're next going to go to CPU stability. This is essentially an indicator to allow you to see how aggressive you want to pursue the overclock, right? And how much do you care about the stability of it? Depending on what you may or may not be doing, you can essentially define different parameters. So take, for instance, somebody like you, a content creator, we have encoding stability. That means that at no level do we want to compromise the overclocking stability. Right. Stability is the 100% most critical thing, and if you're rendering something for 20 minutes or 30 minutes, that's the last thing you want your system to do is crash, right? So you could do that. Normal, I find, though, is actually quite good, and I've found in gaming scenarios and really generalized scenarios, even handbrake encoding, which is quite taxing, I found usually works pretty well. But the choice is up to you. You could go in here and you could also enable what's called AVX instruction sets. So this is great for you guys out there that are using professional programs like Creative Cloud and stuff like that, that use special instruction sets that add more heat but are more stressful. Now for gamers, no game uses AVX instruction. Right. So there's no point in limiting your overclock by setting the AVX. Right. But if you care, once again, the most about
like if you're building
stability,
a workstation, and even if it is a gaming system, if you are also encoding a lot of video, doing video editing, After Effects work, or whatever, you might want to turn that on just to make sure that you're going to get the maximum stability with the overclock.
Exactly. So we're just going to leave that to normal though for that. Now there's 3 other options that right here are really cool, but we're not going to worry about adjusting. Now this is, I think, for you guys that don't know anything about overclocking, this is really cool, right? So you've got where you could pick voltage tuning, so you could set what the maximum voltages you want. Frequency tuning means that you could just set a target frequency that you want to be able to see that if the system could tune towards, and we don't know if the CPU is capable of it, but it'll attempt to automatically scale to it. And the last one I think is one of the coolest ones, which is target temperature. So, you know, you could just say, I don't want my system to, I don't want the overclock to exceed 80 degrees under that load. Right. So whatever that corresponding overclock is, then that's what gets set. So the system's
just going to automatically go faster and faster and faster until it reaches that
temperature.
Threshold.
Exactly, whatever that is. And so the great thing about all of this that we talked about, again, is this is all specific to your CPU, your cooling solution, your power supply. If we built 2 exact same systems, you could have 2 different results.
Yeah, definitely.
So last but not least, we have some other optimization routines that actually we can go ahead and just throw them in there and let's do them at the same time. So one of the cool things we can do is we can calibrate all of our fans. So I'm going to go ahead and connect these 2 fans really quick for you guys so you can see what this will actually look like in real time when we run the auto overclock, and it'll also run the fan calibration. So let me go ahead and connect these quickly here and see maybe if we got any other new questions coming up.
Sure. One of the questions actually that I can answer is about the RGB RAM there. That's the G-Skill Trident RAM, and the driver is going to be updated for the new ASUS AM4 motherboards, the X370, so that you'll actually be able to control it with the Aura software as well. That's still
Correct.
a little few days out though.
Yeah, we're still working on that. We will have, definitely when we have the update available, we will definitely make an announcement for it. If you notice when we had the ASUS Aura software, it had each one of the components that were available to control. So when that update is released, the RAM will be an option, and then you can synchronize it, correct.
All right, got another question. So right now there's the crosshair at the top end and then the prime on the lower end. Are we going to see any Strix? Are we going to see an ITX board? What's kind of coming in the future?
So I can't talk about stuff that may potentially be under design, but I can tell you that we are committed to having a very rich ecosystem for AMD series Ryzen enabled motherboards. So definitely you're going to continue to see, let's just say, more things in the future. So
I mean, there are 2 other boards available. There's the B350 series boards, right?
Correct. Yeah. So now
this is the X370. This is still kind of the highest end chipset, but there's the B350 that's out, and then there's also a micro ATX version of that. So not quite mini ITX, but the micro ATX. You can still build a small form factor system with that.
Hey, JJ, can you address the RAM issue again? Some people are online are having problems with RAM that's going above, say, 2100 speeds.
So yeah, I think maybe after we do this overclocking, we can actually show people exactly a demonstration of how overclocking can work on AMD-enabled systems for Ryzen specifically. But again, to give you guys context, so if you're going to be running 2 DIMM channel configurations, the board can fully support up to 3200 megahertz. Okay, so
just with 2 DIMMs in there.
Correct, 2 DIMMs. And that's going to pretty much be capable on great boards. Now, there may be other boards on the market that might not be able to hit those same frequencies because there is some requirement on the hardware design and the UEFI, but the Ryzen series CPU is not limited in this regard. So we can hit pretty aggressive DDR4 frequencies up to that 3200 megahertz. Right. So that's going to be for 4 gig DIMMs, 8 gig DIMMs, and even 16 gig DIMMs. If you're talking about in 2 DIMM configurations, right? Once you go to 4 DIMMs though, you will have a lower limit. Now the other factor as well is you want to keep in mind that many of these kits are XMP, so they're Intel certified kits. So it's not necessarily a plug and play scenario. And our board take, for instance, there is a special profiling option that you do want to reference to attempt to take those values and try to auto apply them so that they work correctly. In some scenarios though, and this is similar to previous AMD generations, there may be some manual tuning that may be required to get that to optimally work. But we have found that we've had very good success at taking a wide number of kits. And I can show you that, like I said, maybe a little bit later. I can drop in those 3000 DIMM kits, and we can see how that would run if we wanted to try to run this on this setup. So I got my fans connected here. So let's go ahead and get ready to start this process, and we'll go from there.
So these fans, they're kind of representing what you might set up as an exhaust fan or an intake fan.
Correct.
They're just kind of showing how we can calibrate the fans using the software.
So this would be kind of, I guess, my potential scenario, right? Is you got back fan. This might be like a side or bottom mounted fan, and then we'd have like our front fans, or this could also be maybe your top fan over
top
here.
exhaust.
Exactly. So you've got a couple of different scenarios. Now, actually, before we go in terms of running this, one thing I would do is if we go back to the software, one really cool thing that we can do here in the software is that we can actually target the locations for the fans. So if I click the start button, what it'll actually do is some fans will actually slow down or turn off entirely. And the reason why you can do that is that you can then target knowing, hey, which fan is it in that system, right? And the
So
reason
if you plugged them all in and you weren't paying attention to which
Which
chassis,
header.
which chassis header you plugged it into, this will tell you.
Exactly, and then from there, if we pop back over to the software interface, you can actually then define where it sits in the chassis. So that's pretty slick, right? Because then you can tell it, hey, it's a front fan, or it's a top fan, or it's a bottom fan. And the other part is that you can go to the chassis fan name, and you could delete that, and you could actually rename it to, intake fan or exhaust fan or whatever it is you want. So that when you end up going into the monitor, it looks a lot easier in terms of, I know, okay, front fan, intake fan, blah, 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 right?
And one of the best scenarios that you actually use this for would be targeting fans that hit just your GPU. So it's not just going off of your CPU or your motherboard temps. It's really just pushing some air right when you need it across your graphics card.
Yeah, so that's actually a critical feature as well that we now have for this generation, that we can map the fans to different headers to respond to different temperature sources. So if we wanted to respond to, the GPU, the motherboard temperature, different things like that. And we'll show that once we run the calibration. So now that we've got our settings in play, let's just go ahead and click the start button, and we'll click yes. So the system is now going to actually restart. At this point, essentially what the software is doing is it's sending essentially information over to the motherboard to saying, hey, start this auto overclocking process. So it's going to actually do a small little baseline auto overclock where we've tested a whole bunch of CPUs to know that that's very consistent. But unlike presets, this is pretty much a 100% hit rate, where it's like about I believe 3.75 gigahertz. So it's a very moderate overclock, but we know pretty much all of them will do that. So it'll start from that routine, and then from there we'll continue to scale up in terms of the CPU frequency. So it's going to reboot now back into the desktop environment. And we're going to get into the desktop here.
All right.
So we can see here, it should be bringing up our task manager.
So
You can see we've got our
3.8.
1800X, and we can see we've got all our threads here. And in a little bit, the actual application is going to launch. Now, there's a little bit of a delay because, of course, there's things that load up in terms of your operating system, and so it wants to give some time for those applications to be able to run. So we're going to let it get to that process, and then from there, it'll continue through the routine. So you can see actually right here, it's actually a little bit higher. It's 3.850. So 3.8. So that's actually a nice little bump already, 250 megahertz.
Yeah,
and hey, if you wanted to stop, you could just click the stop button.
Yeah.
That's a really easy overclock, right? Bam, I'm already done. I'm happy with that.
Yeah.
So
is this going to continue pushing it?
yes.
Okay.
So, but we're enthusiasts. This is Newegg. We're interested in seeing what we can do.
Push some limits, see how high I can go.
So we're going to click continue. So now, what you're going to see right here is that the interface is going to begin the auto overclocking routine.
Okay.
So here's the frequency. You can see that actually the stress test is running. If we look at the task manager, the CPU is getting loaded across all cores in real time. And so that's where if you kind of want to run a longer period, you just adjust that interval that we talked about, right?
Yeah.
But you can see as it's doing this,
It looks so odd to see like 8 cores going at once.
yeah, it's
Or
16 threads, yeah.
That's crazy.
So here we can see the frequency, and you can
Now
see,
we're at 3.9.
and we report to you all the information, so the CPU temperature, the wattage, the voltage, all that is provided to you. So we pretty much just need to leave it doing its thing, and we're going to see what goes up there. For most of the series CPUs right now, which you're probably going to be nominally seeing for 1700 to the 1800X, it's probably around, I'd say, a 4 gigahertz, with some of the samples with good cooling solutions getting to 4, 4.1, maybe even 4.2 gigahertz is possible in some scenarios.
Wow.
So the big conversation that's happening online, just in general, is real-world gaming performance. what are your thoughts on that?
So actually, the Ryzen architecture is really impressive in terms of the IPC gains that have been made. So if you talk about gaming at the target resolutions that we would be building here, so we're building a system for 2560 by 1440 gaming, or in 4K gaming, you've got a GPU that can legitimately offer a comparable level of performance to what you're going to have on Intel. And in addition to that, also, if you take a look at games that feature better threading, right? So if you take a look at a lot of EA titles, so like Battlefield 1 or Total War, Warhammer, these games love multi-threaded performance. You can actually get really, really great performance. Now, in terms of some games where you're going to have lighter threads, right? That's where the overclock is going to help to make up a little bit of that in comparison to those other gameplay experiences you can have. But I think it really defines what your target resolution experience is. But for me, for the most part, if you're talking about a 2560 by 1440 gaming experience, 4K gaming experience, or if you're a streamer, this is also another big part.
Yeah.
If you stream and game at the same time,
that's when those extra cores.
This is almost impossible to do on I'd say mainstream enthusiast, Intel platform, because you're going to drop frames, especially if you want to do CPU encoding, which most people generally agree that CPU encoding is the highest quality level encoding, as opposed to using a fixed function encoder in the GPU. So having those 16 threads, oh wow, okay, so we've already gone over 4 gigahertz.
Yeah, we just hit over 4 gigahertz. I don't know if we can get that screen back up. While we've been talking, the overclock's been ramping up in the background.
Yeah, we need a little round of applause for going over 4.
So
yeah,
4 gigahertz.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah. So we're a little bit shy of 4.1. So that's pretty impressive. But yeah, so getting back again to that streaming scenario, if you're a gamer, so you're streaming your titles, right? And you're also gaming, and you want to be able to maintain a high frame rate and not drop frames, this is also where this platform really shines. So I think the main thing is that this architecture allows for some really impressive performance for a wide range of scenarios. And so it just comes down to picking the scenario that you're looking to target and see if this sits in that right space for you, right? Also, I think, interesting enough, we're talking about the 1800X, but things that I think are going to get even more interesting as we take a look at the R5 series of CPUs in terms of their price to performance ratio that AMD's talked about, and running those on these X370 boards also. So some interesting stuff to come down the pipe.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing those.
4.1.
So now we're at 4.1.
I'm going to do a slow clap.
Slow-mo.
Slow clap. Yeah, 4.125 now. Okay.
Yeah. So it's
pretty crazy. Now, one thing that is interesting,
territory here.
we do use what's called an offset voltage. So this won't use a static voltage. So this is better than traditional manual overclocking in that a static voltage is fixed. That means that regardless of what you're doing, the voltage is always consistent. In this scenario, the voltage actually is a bit more dynamic. So depending a little bit on load and frequency, it will kind of move up and down a little bit. But we will continue to tune things. So we're at 4.150. I think it's probably going to get pretty close here to
4.1.
So,
there we go.
Okay, so it crashed there. Now this is normal. So this is normal,
so
because
we kind of found the threshold. Right?
Yes, and this is just like it would happen in manual overclocking. The difference is we saved a heck of a lot of time, because
we just had the system do it for us.
Yeah, if I was manual overclocking, I would need to go into the UEFI, set the actual values, reboot, go into the OS, stress test, crash, and then keep changing. Now you could do it in an intermediate way, which I also like, which is you could use our AI suite and increase the voltages in the multiplier in real time in the OS manually and stress test, but it still would take you longer. It's not as fast as doing this. Even if you wanted to manually go back and enter in the values yourself, you still have just gotten a really good baseline of knowing what your system is capable
but didn't you
of.
set the max temperature at 70 degrees?
No, for this one I left it at default.
Default.
So,
okay, so just whatever temperature.
Yeah, so here actually our trigger max temperature is 90 C.
Okay.
That's still prior to the actual thermal throttle, and keep in mind that in gaming scenarios we're never going to see that temperature anyways, right? So that is the default. But if you want to tune for that, you can.
So so when it tunes it runs the CPU at 100%.
Yep. So yeah, it gets fully loaded. So it is stress testing the CPU, and it is using actually a special heavy stress test that's actually based off of prime derivative. So it is a quite taxing CPU test that we actually have in place. So now what the system's doing is that it's going back and looking at the logged information to know what was the last value that was stable.
Worked.
Exactly.
I think it was 4.15.
Yeah, so we'll see. Usually there's a little bit of what's called a rollback, so that we don't.
Oh, so it might take it back a couple notches.
Exactly, because we want to try to keep you in a little bit more realm of a safe level operation.
Well, and that's where having a longer test period would come in handy, because we're doing 15 seconds.
Correct.
Right. So it was doing one for 15 seconds, then moving up. If you did it for like 10 minutes, then you might get more accurate readings.
Yeah, well, and that actually depends on the cooling solution. If you have a cooling solution that might hit a higher thermal wall, here, actually, I wouldn't expect that we'd have too much of a difference because we have such a good cooler.
Yeah.
But if you went with a smaller cooler, you might actually have a bigger difference if you had a longer interval.
Okay.
So here you can actually notice our fans are starting to turn off and on because
Right.
now we're not just overclocking the system, we're optimizing all the fans.
Okay.
So now what it's doing is it's running through finding out what the maximum and minimum speeds of all these fans are in real time. So I've got these add-in fans. These are the Thermaltake Ring. These are 140 millimeter fans. So these are kind of representative, like I said, of different scenarios: top fan, or maybe exhaust fan, or maybe like
Right.
a side fan. But what you're seeing is they're now all slowing down. And the reason why this is important is because historically, when you used to run like a fan speed option in like the BIOS, it might say like silent or standard or something along those lines,
Right.
but it wouldn't necessarily be a representative of what the system is truly capable of, right?
Yeah.
So when we actually store all these values, the cool part about it is that we find what the minimum aspect is and then what the maximum aspect is for the fans, so that when you then go into the preset options, you're going to have the ability to click like silent and the actual fans will turn off versus just going to like an approximate silent speed,
Right.
right? Or you can tune up to a higher level.
Yeah, and
So-
for people who haven't built a PC in a while, this is not a small thing. Like you think about the high-performance PCs in the past, they just sound like jet engines.
I think
Yeah.
I stepped on the cord during the intermediate of our system.
Really?
Yeah. So let me
So you got to
check
plug.
here. Yeah. Oh, no, I think it's okay. There. Okay. Let me power
But
back
the
on.
new fan software definitely, it's one of these things that just makes like life so much nicer, especially with the cases that have, tempered glass or some acoustic inside the case to sort of dampen the noise. It actually really makes it's almost, for most usage, nearly silent. Now, JJ, one question that's coming up online is, what if you overclock, say, 2 cores or 4 cores out of this 8-core processor? Are you going to see a higher clock speed,
So
or what are you gonna, what's
right
gonna happen?
now, you don't have necessarily yet the ability to do per-core tuning, so this is something that AMD is currently looking at in terms of incorporating. So ASUS has had a long history of being able to enable this type of flexibility from a tuning perspective. So right now, when you kind of pursue overclocking on a Ryzen series CPU, it's really about an all-core focus. But that, to a degree, kind of makes sense with Ryzen because you're talking about an 8-core, 16-thread part. So while yes, per core tuning, I'm a huge fan of it because you can be leaving megahertz on the floors by trying to force all your cores versus some smaller cores might be able to reach higher frequencies. It is something that might come out at a later date. But right now, when you pursue overclocking, you're looking at all core frequencies. Okay. So let's get back in. It should hopefully pick up here in terms of the last option. If not, we'll rerun that fan tuning part just so you guys can kind of see that last portion of it. But we'll also be able to double check, I guess, the frequency.
Yeah.
Because normally what we've
I
actually...
wanna see it should be set to that.
Yeah, correct. The last
frequency, right?
safe value. So we should be able to see that. So I'll give it a second here.
Also,
before
some
I
people
open it
online were
back
asking about the graphics cards. We're running right now the GTX 1070. This is the Strix edition, and one of the things you'll notice is that the card is, yes, it is powered on, but it is the fans are not spinning because there's no load on the graphics card right now. So it only spins up one by one by one. It's kind of cool to see.
Yep.
And most people don't see it because they don't have a vertical.
Correct, yeah. So this is
layout.
a feature that we actually launched in the industry that now actually many other companies have tried to implement a similar type of design version, but we were the first vendor to implement this, and it's called our 0 dB operating mode.
Right.
Because the reality is that when you're sitting just reading your email, you're on Reddit, or watching YouTube videos,
Yeah.
or listening to music, even in basic games, there's no reason to have the fan spin and produce noise, you know?
Right.
So you might as well go ahead and reduce that. So just because I don't want these to fall over quickly, I'm just going to go ahead and disconnect one of these, and I'm going to hold this one just in case we need to do that fan profiling. So give me 1 second here. Jump into this. And let's see if they did do their calibration here. Yeah, so you don't hear it. You might not be able to hear it, guys, but these fans are now ramping up. They ramped up to their full speed.
They're still pretty quiet.
Yeah. And then
Although it's an open case and we're in a big room, so.
And so now here I'm going to go ahead and click on the silent profile. If it did store the full calibration, then they should.
That should go down to like the lowest.
Correct.
value.
Yeah, so now I can already hear that they slowed down, but I don't know, because we cut it right when the fan calibration profiling was running.
Right.
So yeah, I think actually I still need to run that for it to get that minimum value.
Okay.
Okay, so give me 1 second here, but let's check on our CPU frequency.
Yeah, let's see what we got going there.
We're 1 second here, and I'll let you guys know when I have this open here.
Also, for people that have just tuned in, we're overclocking on the new Ryzen CPU. It's the 1800X. That's the 8 core.
So
it's
yeah, we have
499.
4.1 gigahertz.
Right. So
Yeah.
we ran the auto. What would you call it? Auto tune.
Yeah, it's our auto tuning software, which
Auto-tuning
is part of our 5-way optimization suite. So
And it found that the maximum that this thing can take is 4.1 gigahertz on all 8 cores.
And that's
So-
with very little work. That's super easy, which
yeah,
is
that
really
was, that was
exciting.
all through automatic.
Yeah, you
So-
click a button in that, and you just watch it do its thing.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
let's see here. There you go. 4.1 right there,
Yeah.
running our Cinebench. You guys can switch over to the screen there. There you go.
Not too bad. Now, what do you think if someone's on a 240 millimeter?
I think it would still, maybe 4 gigahertz. It depends on really what the thermal load is that you're going to be trying to place onto the system. But I still think, 240 with, I think, the 1700, 1700X, even 1800X, you could be looking at, definitely a 4 gigahertz approximate. In my
Definitely
testing,
close.
I'd say that that's a realistic frequency that you could achieve in terms of that type of performance. Now, we're using Cinebench here, but another great program, if you guys want to get it, and it's entirely free, we provide it to the community, is our Real Bench application. One of the great things that I try to advocate to people is that for stress testing and for overclocking, you actually want to create baselines. So the cool thing is that we have specific scores that are created for different types of applications, and these are all open source programs that we use for image editing. We use Handbrake for encoding. This helps to create a foundation so that when you run it at stock, you know that you actually are making sure that you get a clear performance improvement from your overclock. So take for instance here, if I want to run some advanced image editing to see if I would have gotten an improvement, I could click the start button, and you're going to see that it's going to go through a whole bunch of different things. So it's going to apply some filters, some sharpening, some resizing. So you can see it's pretty cool to be able to see this happen, and this is a tool that we do provide to our enthusiasts.
Yeah, this is a benchmark that's made by ASUS ROG, and you can see it's doing its thing now. And where can people download this tool?
They can download it directly from the RG forum. So it's a free-to-use software
I think
application.
that's rog.asus.com.
That's correct. And keep in mind, this is all running at this 4.1 gigahertz. So, this is now seriously monstering through some performance right here. So
It's pretty impressive, and there's some questions online. One of the big questions is overclocking dangerous? People have seen in the past where these PCs get super hot, burn houses down. Not really, but So talk about like the safety features and should
so
people
the
be
board
worried?
has a lot of built-in fail-safes in this regard. So if it reaches too critical of a temperature, if something were to happen, the board actually will automatically shut down. We have certain voltage-defined limits, not only in our UEFI, but also in our software to try to minimize that. Now, from a manual overclocking perspective, I will say that some users that go too aggressive and have too high of a sustained voltage, there is something that is called voltage degradation that you don't want to provide to your CPU. If you provide too much consistent voltage to your CPU over a long period of time, then it could actually degrade it, and it could reduce its lifespan by a fairly decent factor. So let's say if your CPU could last, let's say theoretically like 5 years or something like that, you could see it sometimes maybe have a reduced lifespan. But this is where you use sensible voltage parameters. So if you were manually tuning it, my recommendation would probably be to not exceed probably 1.35, maybe 1.4. And then ideally I would also use an offset voltage. I wouldn't use what's called a static voltage. That will also help to conserve life because the voltage essentially will come up and will come down. So that's much healthier than keeping the voltage always at a really high level and having your CPU always be driven with that high level of voltage.
Yeah, but for 90% of users, you should just click the simple optimization, let the system do it.
Yeah, well,
yourself.
you can see.
It's definitely a lot safer to use the ASUS AutoTune software. It's just like we just did, and there's a lot of other options in there that you can tweak and try to get a little bit more performance, but still stay in a safe area, in a safe zone.
And the big part too is, what Greg's talking about here too is you get to control the parameters, right? If you want to target the temperature, the voltage like we talked about. And this is where we have been designing this software and refining it literally at this point now almost over about 8 years since the very first version of it. And every generation, we're basing it off of feedback directly from our community to give them the options that you guys want and help to ensure a great experience. And again, while it is software, keep in mind that these values are all directly defined in the UEFI the same way if I was manually doing it. So this is a manual automated overclock, quote unquote, right? So I think maybe we can do the DRAM tuning.
Yeah,
you know,
let's
we did
check
the
out
other.
yeah, we had the question about the DRAM tuning. Let's
Sure.
see what we can. Let's see what kind of frequencies we can reach with this.
So let me go ahead and pop out of here. Showed you. That was pretty awesome, man. 4.125 gigahertz. That's
Yeah.
pretty crazy.
Without doing anything, just bolting it together and
Yeah,
telling it to go.
yeah. We can see right there. Yeah, it did settle on 4.125. So
Nice.
pretty awesome overclocking experience here for Ryzen on the 1800X.
Yeah.
And keep in mind, with our Prime
Yeah.
X370. So this is our entry X370 motherboard, right?
What is the retail on that?
Yeah, I think this one's 160.
Yeah,
What's the price
it's
point?
around that. Yeah.
Yeah. So pretty sweet spot for a board that's got all this stuff
Yeah,
packed into it. Give you
definitely.
a great experience.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but the Prime has pretty much the same software as the top-end ROG crosshairs. Is that
Yeah,
right?
the software is actually exactly the same. The only difference is, the power delivery design is a little bit higher end, so you might get a little bit better, thermal performance for, let's say, the VRM under a long sustained load.
For the crosshair board.
Yeah, for the crosshair board, but you still get a robust and reliable VRM solution here. So right now, I'm just going into the UEFI. I'm going to reset the board to defaults.
Okay.
I think I'll jump into Windows. I'll show what it looks like in terms of the DRAM frequency at baseline, and then we'll pop in the memory, do the DOC pre-profile, and see if
Okay.
we can actually show a difference in terms of the
So we
DRAM
want to try.
frequency.
We want to try with the Corsair Vengeance.
Yep. I think
Okay.
that's a good choice because
So this stuff's rated at.
I think it's a three.
I think this was 2800.
Yeah, so this actually kit has a two profile set.
Okay.
2800, and I think actually has a 3000 profile set
Okay.
when we pop it
Cool.
in.
Yeah, we'll try that.
So let me.
Then what's this Crucial? What's this one rated at?
That one's pretty conservative. It's a 2400 kit.
Okay.
So that's actually
So
where
this
a
is
lot
like
of users are
like
going
a
to.
solid baseline kit. That would
But
should
it's
work fine.
but it's got camo on it, so that means it goes faster.
It's actually very difficult to see. I don't even know if I'm holding it right now.
Yeah.
All right.
I actually think that is some of the best looking RAM. It's got a white PCB on it for
Yeah.
white builds. It's great.
Yeah, it's a very nice looking kit. So we're going to go ahead and right now just set the board to defaults. For you guys that are wondering, and if you guys watch from the beginning, I know that I still haven't gone back and put my little underfill in. So I will go do that. Don't worry about that.
The RGB LED lighting.
Yeah, because we still got some little bit to go there. So don't worry, I will get there eventually. So let me just
But
make
this is what
sure.
always happens. You set out to build a system, and you're like, let's overclock it right away.
Yeah, I'm just like I
Yeah,
want
Let's see what I can do.
to have fun.
Well, if you're buying new overclockable CPUs, you gotta overclock it. I wonder what the percentage of people who buy CPUs that can be overclocked and never do it. It's probably not a small number. It's probably
Actually, it's pretty
75%.
I think
sizable.
that's
We
what
have-
I have on my home system.
Oh God, don't a minute.
All right,
I won't tell you
so
what it is.
we are shutting down the system right now so that I can go ahead and drop in these GIMs, and we'll see if we can try to position the monitor a little bit easier for you guys too. So give me just 1 second to go do some of these parts. All right, popping these guys out. One point I will also always caution is try to make sure that when you are touching your DIMMs, do not touch the bottom of the DIMM interfaces. We have found historically that sometimes your oils, minerals, when they make actually contact with the DIMM interface, it can actually cause sometimes initialization issues. So you do want to
So
be
don't touch
cautious.
it.
Yeah, be very careful not to touch it, because we have found that sometimes people, when they have like DIMMs that are dropping,
Right.
or that it's not initializing, or they run into stability, we end up having them recommend that they clean it.
Yeah.
And once it's cleaned, they go
Yeah.
back and it fixes the problem. So
Especially don't touch it if you've been eating some Cheetos or Doritos. Or any sort of kind of.
any fast
snack,
food,
you know?
some nice juicy
I thought
bacon
Doritos were
cheeseburgers.
required whenever you build.
You're all right. Yeah, I suppose you gotta
Choose chopsticks.
you gotta-
if you're gonna eat.
make your
Cheetos.
considerations. All right. Okay.
Or
So
spoon.
we've got our DIMMs in there. Get my jumping.
Alrighty. Let's jumpstart this thing.
There we go. All right. So let me see if we can get a little bit tighter in here.
So we're gonna go back into the UEFI.
Yes, we're going to go into our UEFI here in a moment. Okay, and then we'll try to see if we can get this positioned best for you guys. You guys might need to see my face. Maybe I can even move it here a little bit. Give me a second, guys. I think
It looks good.
I think that,
good, yeah.
that's good. Okay.
Yeah, I can see it.
All right, so first and foremost, actually, one thing you'll see here is that we have this really nice, just easy mode interface. It gives you, temperature, it gives you your voltage, you got all your SATA ports immediately notified, it shows you the DIMMs installed, you got all the fan speed information, you can run your fan calibration and profiling, you can adjust your boot order. So that start screen is super useful just
Yeah.
right off the bat.
You can, but you don't have to. I think that's fine.
Yeah. And even right here, there is the DOCP option. So there's a profile option right there to just enable the memory profiling. But
So they just call it profile, but it's actually the XMP profile that it's looking at.
correct, yep. So we're going to go into AI Tweaker. Once we've gone into AI Tweaker, we're going to go to Overclock Tuner, and we're going to pick DOCP.
Okay.
Once we pick DOCP, you're going to see that it will show you the two profiles. So yeah, I was correct
Okay,
in that
yeah.
there is two. There was a
I believed you.
3000 and a 2800 profile. So we could pick either one. It doesn't really matter. So I think based on the divider support, actually it's going to do like 2933 or something like that.
Right.
I think so. Yeah, so that's correct.
So
So,
2933.
so now what it attempts to do is automatically extrapolate that information. So it will apply that, and now we will essentially be able to operate at that value. So
Okay.
our baseline 2133, this is a pretty big uptick in terms of the memory. I mean, this I would
Yeah.
already say would be over the normal kits that most users would purchase.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
we
once
just
you, once you get into like the 3000 megahertz kits, they get a little pricey. You
For
know,
sure, for sure.
Especially for the larger.
for the larger density
larger densities,
configuration. Yeah. So from there, we don't really need to do anything. You could just save it and you could be good to go. But one other thing I can show you guys if you want to reference some information is you want to find more information about your DRAM, we offer this really cool tool called the SPD tool. So you can go into this, and this actually will give you all the really cool specifics about your memory.
Right. So
So
this
to
is
show-
like information that you used to only be able to get with like a CPU ID
Yep.
type software.
Exactly, or you'd have to like look at the box, but like now I can see, here's the vendor, so it's Corsair, it's got the module size, the frequency, the part number, it even has the serial number and production, the XMP validation, all the different tables, so you can see here's the SPD table, the XMP tables. So
Right.
it's nice to kind of be able to kind of double check this information if you need to.
Yeah.
So from there, I can, and if you want to save this information, one actually really cool thing that a lot of people don't know is if I take my flash drive and I plug this into a port and I hit the F12 key, I can save a screenshot of my UEFI.
Wow.
So if you want to be able to go ahead and kind of keep any
Like
key
remember,
settings, or
remember some of the tests that you did?
yeah, whatever, you know, just save a screenshot and now you got a little bitmap file
You know,
in there.
I work for ASUS, and I did not know that was a feature. You learn something new every day.
Yeah, it's a cool feature. I remember when we talked to our R&D team about implementing that. It was
That's
really,
really cool.
really cool feature to be able to cool. So now we also see another really cool ASUS feature, which actually is always the notification of all the changes you made. Because
Right.
sometimes you make changes and you don't remember every change that you made.
Yeah.
So this is kind of like a sanity check.
That would be a good thing to hit F12 for. Save a screenshot
exactly.
of that. Everything that you changed last time.
So now you have this kind of confirmation, okay, these is everything that's being changed. So now we're going to press OK, and the board's going to attempt to pretty much auto-apply our settings, and we'll see if it goes through successful.
Okay.
Hey, JJ,
but-
got a question from Facebook for our Facebook crew, which is pretty sizable right now. Got a question, True Volt.
Yep.
True Volt, is that going to be supported on the new AM4 boards?
You know, I think, well, right now there's all the key technologies, so in terms of like pure power, XFR, all those things are, we've worked with AMD to enable all those key functionalities as far as the architecture implementations. But there is still a lot of kind of design work that AMD is helping to enable through firmware updates for the CPU. So I would definitely say over the next month or so, we're going to continue to see more enhancements for how granularity and control can happen for DRAM and for CPU control. So, you know, definitely this is where I think the long-term UEFI support, not a lot of people realize this, but one of the big differences between different boards that are out there on the marketplace is long-term firmware support. So like, you know, like if you buy like a phone or a tablet,
Yeah.
you kind of like, I want to know that I'm going to get maybe updates for
The
my
latest
phones
updates, yeah.
and things like that. It's very similar, is that while you might not factor in it as like a spec or part of the cost, one of the things that you get with an ASUS board is that we have a very big R&D team that has a long-term cycle support on implementing UEFI updates for our boards. So the difference is if you'll go to like our previous generation, some of the boards have had, you know, maybe 15 to almost 20 releases in their lifespan. That's quite a number of releases that we've done to be able to add in compatibility, enhance performance, fine-tune a lot of different things.
Or just additional features like,
Correct.
that are available on the newer boards.
Yeah, so you can see actually the board posted through, no problems,
Yeah, so we're running
rebooted.
at 2933 megahertz on the memory.
So let me go ahead and open up my ADA64
Well, I
and,
guess we'll check.
and we can switch over to your guys' the output so you guys can see that. So we're going to open up our little CPU ID tool. Yep. And we should be able to have a confirmation. So there you can see, yep, 29, there's a little bit clock speed variance. That's just normal in terms of the clocks. So 2933, essentially we're running at with our corresponding timings, and we can see everything else is working, our CPU frequencies. And if you guys just want to see, of course, a stability marker. So let me resize this a little bit here. And I'm going to go ahead and throw a little bit of a crazy load on this guy. So we'll do that. And I will open up a stability test here. This is 8-64. It's a fairly extreme test to run here, but this is actually going to load all the CPU and all the DIMMs fully. So I'm going to run that stress test, and we're going to see this load up here. So now you can see, of course, all my cores. They're all getting pegged up here, and then you can see memory just rocketed up.
Yeah.
So now we're fully loading all the memory, and of course at that frequency. So you can see we're able to reliably run at that. So anybody that's thinking that high DDR4 frequency is not possible on X370 Ryzen series CPUs, there you go, 2933, and I've actually tested 3200 without any problems, and even on our Crosshair board, we've been able to do higher, and I definitely expect that we're going to continue to keep improving memory interoperability and compatibility and performance tuning over the next few weeks, the next few months. So hopefully this, guys, helps to show you how easy it can be in terms of being able to maximize the DRAM overclocking experience on Ryzen series and X370.
Sweet. So let's go ahead and wrap this show up. Thank you so much, guys, from ASUS for dropping on by. This has been pretty impressive. We've been looking at the AMD Ryzen 1800X CPU. That's the 8-core at $499. Also the ASUS motherboards, the Crosshair, which we showed a little bit earlier, as well as the Prime X370 Pro. So that's the build that we've got going along with a 1080 or a 1070 Strix, actually, as well as a whole bunch of equipment from Thermaltake. So the case is a Thermaltake P3, as well as the ring fans and a RGB power
Trying
supply.
to sneak in my cable here.
Just say that I can do it.
RGB lighting.
Oh, yeah, we got to get the RGB lighting in. But for anyone wondering, with that case, the case you can actually take the feet off and mount it on a wall, which is really cool. A lot of guys do that. It's a pretty cool effect. And also, actually, let's get a shot of the case behind there. So we got the P3 up, but directly behind Greg over there is the P5, also with an ASUS motherboard in it.
So this is a bit bigger. That's this one here, right?
Yeah,
and
so
that one
it
has
allows
a quad radiator.
Yeah,
quad radiator. It's a lot
This
of.
one's got a 480 and a custom liquid cooling loop on this.
Yeah, that's for. It's a lot of overclocking potential on there. It's,
Yeah, that would definitely be for somebody that's doing like a Crosshair 6 with like another 1800X. That would be a pretty monster build to do there.
Yeah.
But hopefully you guys really like this video. I know this is the first year that we're co-working with Newegg. It's been fantastic to be here at Newegg Studios to be able to do this live build for you. If you guys love this type of content, please, drop us hammer that like button, hit that subscribe button. Let us know about in the comments if you appreciated these real-time overclock insights, PC DIY building tips, being able to do this build for you. We'd love to continue to be able to offer this type of great content for you guys, as really this is all about you guys, the PC DIY enthusiasts that are out there. So it has been fantastic to be able to talk about AMD's latest and greatest X370 chipset, Ryzen series CPUs, and of course what we're doing on the motherboard side, and some awesome complementary hardware. So I thank you guys for checking out the stream. Make sure to subscribe, drop us some great comments, and we'll definitely be following up with you guys. So as always, take care, take it easy, enjoy the rest of your day. Greg, thanks for sitting in with me as well.
Thanks for having me. I felt it was cool. I mean, even I learned something new, and just thanks for Newegg for having us down to hang out in your studio and do some live video. So
awesome, guys. Well, this was super fun. Until next time.
Alrighty, see you next time.